under the Data Protection Act, under Section 19, to go and be an authorized officer and work on the behalf of the data commissioner and go to the court and get permission to go to my friend in the nice shirt and ask him to inspect his books, etc., to take away his computers, etc., and to look at that information. So that's a very powerful tool that data protection commissioners have. Now, you know, when we go look at his $3 million firm operation, we're going to find that he is not protecting his employees' information. He's doing something improperly with it. So yes, all right. Now, Brazil, on the other hand, the other day, not so long ago, they got the capacity to conduct even online inspections. So how far in the Caribbean do we really want to go? Can we really be successful in telling Caribbean businesses without a court order we're coming to really look after your business? So all of these are realities that we have to really deal with. Again, just touching on the cultural reality in the Caribbean. Is it really, really possible? Data protection, the fact that Caribbean people generally believe it's okay to share personal information. I mean, maybe I'm in a different jurisdiction. That doesn't happen in the other Caribbean countries where Caribbean people just feel that they have a right to share. Is that a reality for the most part? And they feel that they have a right, I see heads nodding, to share personal information. We read over the fact that the Bahamas Act, and we also have in the Bahamas comprehensive e-commerce legislation. Because of course, if you are conducting business online and you want to develop your jurisdiction in the Caribbean as one where e-commerce thrive, and you want to have this open governance, etc., you need to have data protection laws. So we have comprehensive data protection laws because ours was passed along with what we call the Computer Misuse Act, which deals with cybercrime. It's a good point right here to, I'm not certain whether or not Trinidad has cyber laws. Anybody in the room from Trinidad? Sorry? Not yet, that's what I thought. I just wanted, so you see, why I mentioned cyber laws, because I'm sure a professor will agree with me that there is an overlapping of the data protection and cyber regime, because a lot of the cyber crimes deal with personal information. For example, where banks who are required, banks, as you know, would be under the data protection law, data controller. Everybody agree with that, right? Because they're holding people's personal information, and under Section 6 they're required to provide appropriate safeguards so that those persons' informations are not accessed. But we had a case whereby a hacker got into the bank system and they took my friend $3 million. So you know he was hot, right? And so when we examined it, we saw that there was not what we call in the data protection language, appropriate safeguard. So even if CTU is holding Nigel's information and I sort of see some of the employees around your information, and they're not protecting it. They don't have the kind of software, you know, to prevent people from hacking into the account, and you know, call logs even. It's amazing to me that in some companies, Professor, they don't even have audits or call logs where you can see who went into the computer, at what time did they go into the computer. So if you come before my office, and so when we examined these things and we found out that, look, these people didn't even have basic safeguard. They couldn't say who entered the system, etc., etc. We are likely to find you in breach of the Data Protection Act under Section 660. And so, fortunately for us, we were able to help this young man. In that case, we were able to help someone recover up to $500,000. So, data protection laws, they do work once you're prepared to do the work and to enforce them. I told you about Section 6. which really sets out the principles of data protection. Data must be collected by lawful and fair means. Okay, you can't illegally collect the people's information and throw it out there. And I know, you know, I'm smiling because I'm from the Caribbean, and so I tell people I happen to have a very good idea as to what goes on, right? You can't just go and grab someone's information and throw it in the public domain and say, oh, the ends justify the means, because, you know, and we like to use this, especially in the case where the person is a public figure. You know, always a public figure, should have known what is what. When he was getting into public service, should have known. But you know, how far are you going to go? Does the fact that Sharmie is a public figure, or who wants to be, and I know we're getting, who wants to be my public officer here? I mean, anybody like politics? A zero person. And in the Caribbean, I think the gentleman, you volunteered in the purple, he's going on. Yes, he, the politician, yes, he's entering public life, but what about his daughter? Is it fair to go after his daughter? Should his daughter be fair games? His teenage daughter, and you heard, I think it was someone, the earlier person, talk about child pornography and all this kinds of stuff. And so are you going to just circulate a naked picture of his 13-year-old daughter just because he is a public figure? No. If that had to come before my office, absolutely not. You see? So the ends would not justify the means in that. And I just want to mention section 13E. 13E, why I want to mention that is because it says that as long as it provides for in a legislation, for instance, if the Health Act or any other legislation permits you to disclose certain information, and sometimes information, you need to disclose information, right? Is there a Registrar General's equivalent in police? I'm sure there is. Registrar General, where they give out public records, the birth certificate, the marriage certificate. It is necessary for members of the public to have access to those things. So under the data protection laws, those things will be permitted. But what about the whole question for us, I found, is when we're talking about section 13E, is that can we legislate away privacy? Because if section E is allowed to stand, and just said once it's found in another act, then people just start taking the acts and start adding, okay, give away Nigel address, give away Nigel this, because we need it for healthcare, we need it for this, we need it for, pretty much, if you keep that approach up, you'll find out, well, what is the need for legislation like data protection? So we need to be careful in the Caribbean that we are not basically using legislation to give away privacy. In the Caribbean, and this is very, very important when we're talking about data protection in the Caribbean. Now, I'm not too used, Nigel, to being standing behind. I'm a very interactive person, so I almost have to contain myself not to leave this mic. In the Caribbean, what about constitutions? Caribbean countries, for the most part, they do have constitutions, right? Written constitution. I know Belize has a written constitution, and Trinidad does, right? And so does the Bahamas and many other. How does that play where privacy, for the most part, in the Bahamas in section 21, privacy is a constitutional right. When we're dealing with English, because of course we follow English precedent, but one of the things I always point out is that in England, there is what they call, they don't have written constitution, right? So Parliament basically is supreme there. And so we have this whole issue of dealing with the Caribbean context with respect to privacy in a whole different realm. And I would not say too much on it, except to encourage you to keep your eyes on the Bahamas. There is a case that I think is going to have regional implication for the whole jurisdiction as wide, whether or not, and they're dealing with this whole aspect of parliamentary privilege, the whole issue of data protection in terms of whether or not parliamentarians would be able to go and get people's private information and then put it under the domain, put it in the parliament and then claim exactly. And so, you know, sometimes when we are going through these things, we tend to think about it negatively, but I don't see it negatively. I see it as a means of developing our own jurisprudence in the area and learning from teachable moments, because I believe that case is going to set the tone for the Caribbean region as respect to how we handle the individual's personal information. Just to talk about the jurisdiction, as I kind of try to round up the jurisdictional issue that was mentioned earlier today, and I think I heard a professor, you know, in a brief way mention it. What happens when you're in the Caribbean and you're online? Someone is online in England or Australia or Canada. Which rules apply? I thought it was great when the first speaker made the point about the cloud computer. It's not in the cloud, it's on the ground somewhere, because wherever that is, that's the jurisdiction that you're going to be subjected to. And I think Canada recently passed laws or made it, they said that they didn't want their information to go outside of Canada. And just as the professor was making the point about the IXB and the importance, the critical importance of that when you're talking about having data protection regimes, ensuring that your country's information is protected, that it isn't going before you get it in Belize, it has to go to Miami. So if I'm sending you an email from Bahamas, it's going to Miami first. And where is that jurisdiction? That's under the US law, where they can you know, request everything under the Patriots Act and all those kinds of things. These are the kinds of things in the Caribbean that we really have to apply our mind to. Yes, we say it's expensive. It is expensive, but listen, if people feel that their information is not going to be protected, we're Caribbean people, we're depending on tourism, we're dependent on banking. You see how critical that becomes. So if we don't have strong data protection laws, if we don't develop strong means of protecting our information like encryption and doing what is necessary, what's going to happen? Eventually, all of us probably will be moving out of jurisdiction to look for jobs, all right? Because it means that foreign banks from the EU regions, etc., would not even want to do business with Caribbean countries. So therefore then, what happens to those jurisdictions in the Caribbean that do not have data protection legislation? How do they cope in this world? Well, fortunately, there are mechanisms in place for those countries that do not have data protection laws. You can do it through contract, and what Section 12 of the Bahamian legislation does is it enables you to do those same provisions that are provided in the legislation. You can put them into the contract, and what we say, we want to make sure that there's adequate protection to the jurisdiction for which our information is going to be sent. Let me close by telling you my approach as the former Data Protection Commissioner in dealing with data protection, because of course you hear it a lot, and people talk about online, because that's basically where all of the traffic is, right? Online. When you come, I mean, even now you can see people just periodically checking their, you know, online, their phones, etc. That's where a lot of the business is happening. And so how do you enforce data protection laws for persons who just go online, share your information online? And we hear so much information, data protection laws do not apply to online and social media. To me, that's really foolishness. I'm kind of Caribbean, so if I get a little colloquial in my language, forgive me. But it's real foolishness, because when you look itself at the act in itself, and you see the description of what I told you before, that data is information which can be processed in any form, any form. And so I just want to just read, because I hear this a lot, and I just want to read information in any form that can be processed. And so I hear this a lot as Data Protection Commissioner. Oh, you can't do anything with us because we're not, your office is not able to reach us because we are online. And so I tell them simply, turn to the definition section in the data protection legislation and read what is the definition of processing. And I draw your attention to section D, and I'll just read it for you. It says, let me start from B. Actually, when you're talking processing means organization, adapting, or altering of the information or data, retrieval, consultant, or use of the information or data, transmission of data, especially D, dissemination or otherwise making available. So when you are on the internet, aren't you disseminating information? Aren't you making the information available? And so we have to be very, very careful in how we are conducting ourselves in our organization. Are we protecting our employees? I'm here at the CTU conference. How is Nigel and his team handling my information? Are they under an obligation to ensure that the information I give to them is only used for the purposes for which I gave it to him? If you're an employee and you fill out your form, you fill it out as an employee, can another company call at any given moment and say, look, and tell me, let me just use the telecommunications, which happen. People want records of, I'm going to use a real Caribbean type of scenario, right? Because in the Caribbean, maybe it's not in these other places, but, because y'all will maybe experience difference, but the sweethearts, right? Anybody know the Caribbean sweethearts? Yeah, I'm going to use that example, where the sweethearts want to know, be it man or woman, where the other person is, or whether their husband was calling another woman, or how many times that person called that person, and what did he transfer from his account to the other person's account. And you have your friends working in these institutions in Petalco. Petalco is our local telecommunication, but I don't know what police telecommunication is called, but wherever, working there. And so you're calling and you're saying, hey, get out from Angola, because that's your cousin, that's your girl, that's your spa, you know what I mean? Yeah, man, Nigel, he ain't been home last night. Yeah, I see this phone, I see this phone number. I check his phone, and this number's showing up a couple times. Tell me what that is. You know what I mean? So you, forgetting about data protection, forgetting about privacy and all the right, that's your cousin, that's your boy. You're going to go, and some employees do it. They go and they get all the history, and they say, yeah, child, oh, I'm not making no woman in here, sweetheart, because I want to reach back to the Bahamas. Except for Francola, you can be sweetheart too. But yes, her name is Francola. Yes, she went through the CTU. She's a manager. Here's her number. Call her. Let her know. Don't fool with your. Sometimes we take it slight, but these things can lead to massive data breaches. Now, when you come with your crocodile tires before me when I was data commissioner, you think you're going to get any sympathy from me? You're not going to get any sympathy from me. We had a recent case in the Bahamas recently where, as I said, my approach is to work with regulatory bodies. So even if you feel that you're not going to be prosecuted under the Data Protection Act, when this, in the Bahamas we say chickaroo, when this DPC was in place, and this Bahamian gal was in place, you didn't breach people information and come to my office and think you could walk off, slip out on technicalities. Because then, if it was an issue that involved the police, then I would liaise with the police. If it was an issue that involved the social services ministry, then I would. But I'm going to make sure, and that's the approach, that a data breach, if you commit a data breach, that you are prosecuted or that you are dealt with. In closing, let me just say this as I close. I don't know how very much seriously we take data protection in the Caribbean, but considering the fact of all these recent Panama leaks and all these stuff, I think it's high time that we as Caribbean people take our head out of the proverbial sand and understand that we are living in a very different world where people in the world themselves are giving themselves extraterritorial powers. And you know that means they're reaching across jurisdiction to punish you. And this is a true example, because I always like to speak frankly to you so that you understand the reality of the situation. We had a case where something was shared in the Bahamas, offline and uploaded, and I can tell you before the person could count almost 1, 2, 3. That's how fast it happened. Professor Dem was in the Bahamas to collect the person. You see? So when you are, he's a good sport. I'm just using it. But when you are operating in the Caribbean and you're thinking that you're operating in isolation, you're not operating in isolation. And finally, if you want to really feel or appreciate the full extent of data protection, put yourself as a data subject and ask yourself, if I'm the data subject, if this is my information, how do I want it to be handled? Would I still want people to know the information, that when the information come out on my friend there in the blue right there with the glasses? Yeah. When the information coming out on her, oh yeah, let them tell it, yeah. Yeah, let it happen to her. But what if it happened to you or your daughter? What if you're like me as a data commissioner and see mothers coming in, strolling through the door, broken with their teenage daughters whose lives is practically destroyed because some insensitive person shared their information on the net, and you see mothers who have to send their daughters out of the jurisdiction just so that they don't deal with the shame of some person, and in many cases adults sharing their information. So I will finally say one thing: think on these things, and end by saying, as the Privacy Commissioner, former Privacy Commissioner of Canada, Dr. Anne Kawak said, the future of privacy depends on the extent to which it is embedded in technology. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sharmie. I took note that there were two, you mentioned two data protection regimes that we could model, EU and APEC. Bahamas was more the EU model. Did you find that it compared well what was actually enacted and implemented in Bahamas? Did it compare well with the EU system?
I think in the Bahamas, yes, we model with the EU system, and a lot of our policy with respect to data protection is derived from those systems, like in the EU and the OECD, etc. However, like I say, when you're talking about passing the adequacy test now, that becomes an onerous thing. Where I believe what I would take away from the Apex jurisdiction is that in the Apex jurisdiction, they have what they call corporate privacy rules, which allows you to share information between those countries, whereas if you were in the EU, what happened is you can only share information between like European countries where they themselves are members, and the rules there are more stringent in terms of disclosure of information. However, in the APEC, where countries more have an opportunity to shape their own data protection regime, so that's the advantage.
And for end users, I guess the message I also took note was they need to have appropriate safeguards, appropriate safeguards, at least as a minimum.
Yes, can everybody hear me, because this mic is going off? Can you hear me down there? Yes, okay.
Online may not be able to.
Oh yes, yeah, people online, is it?
Okay, it's making some noise.
There are too many mics on. Yeah, just to not be alone.
Okay, he's telling me don't talk loud, so I probably have to do this. Yes, I'm sorry, repeat the question again.
Appropriate safeguards.
Yes, appropriate safeguard. As I said when I ended, it doesn't matter. You can put in all the legislation in the world in place, and you can do a whole lot of things. But if you don't have those appropriate safeguards as outlined in Section 6, if you don't have the encryption, if you don't have the anti-spy software, etc., it really won't make any difference, because what you'll have is a pretty office. But if it, let me give a very practical example that does not even involve technology. If you have files in your room, because a lot of we hope to move away from it, the manual files, but people are still, especially the older generation, they're holding on to that for that manual file system because that's what they know. But if you leave the rooms open and all the people files in there, and then the things are not fireproof or the locks are not secure, it doesn't make sense if people walk in and carry out the whole filing system. And so tomorrow, what will happen to your company? It will be destroyed. So safeguarding the information is very, very important. It's critical. And as I said, if you don't embed it in technology, if people can just get into your system, then it's pointless.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes, one in the back. Michelle? No, here.
Hi.
Yes.
My name is Asha Ford. I'm here from the Telecommunications Regulator in Barbados. So I have 3 questions. Would you prefer them one at a time? Or
One at a time.
Okay. So the first one is, you spoke about the responsibility of persons to know what the law is in their particular jurisdiction. I was curious about what role you think the Data Protection Office should play in actually educating the public. So you've just put legislation in place.
Yeah.
For some of us, we don't have legislation. Is it okay to say, well, we put the law in place, you did it, and it's your responsibility?